What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. Today we are going to do the final video for our Blood Death Knight series as we get into the Covenant stack ranking based on the Covenant ability granted, and this hopefully will help you determine where exactly you want to put your Blood Decay when Shadowlands launches. Worst case scenario, we're going to see a couple of changes. But overall, we're about a month out from expansion and things are looking like they're pretty solidified in terms of the class abilities that are being granted at this point in time in the beta testing. If you have not seen any of my videos before in terms of how I stack rank covenants, a couple of things that you need to know. First of which is I am taking a very specific spec approach to these stack rankings. I am only talking about Blood Death Knight. I am not talking about Death Knight Frost or Unholy, so keep that in mind. This is strictly if I'm a tank and that's my primary function, this is where I would put my Blood DK. Number 2, I am projecting these Covenant abilities in terms of power, how much fun they are, so on and so forth, and I'm projecting that based on the early stages of what we know we will get in terms of content from Shadowlands. So from a PvP or a PvE perspective, that's Torghast, that's Dungeons, and that's Castle Nathria. Number 3, I want my Covenant ability to make me feel as though I can jump into more than one type of content. In other words, I'm not picking my Covenant ability just because it allows me to run dungeons really well or because it makes me a good raid tank. I would like it to enable me to do any type of content that I would like in the realm of PvE, and that is the way in which I have taken all of these abilities into account in my stack ranking. And last but certainly not least, and something I do want to call out, is that all of my testing, all of my hours and hours of testing that I've done with these skills is excluding conduits. And the reason for doing that is because the overarching ability is what changes your gameplay style and will ultimately sometimes, and in some cases, change your rotation. It is what Blizzard wants to define you. The conduits are not that. The conduits are relatively invisible. Once you set them, you pretty much forget them. They give you things like additional power, additional player power. They give you more utility. They give you more, finesse, whatever you want to call it. The conduits are certainly a way in which Blizzard is going to make changes to your Covenant abilities, but that's all they are at this point in time, and that's likely where you're going to start to see some tweaks in this closing month leading up to Shadowlands. So keep that in mind. This is why when I went ahead and graded out and ranked each one of these Covenant abilities, I did it without conduits, simply because the borrowed power and all of that, it's only going to be either enhanced or nerfed through the conduit system. So let's go ahead and jump into and we'll work our way up to the number 1. So starting at the bottom, number 4 is the footage that you're looking at. Number 4 is Necro Lords for Blood Decay. And a couple of things that are worth calling out here. Fleshcraft is an amazing ability for just about every tank. It can give you up to 150% shield, health pool because of the 50% shield. The baseline shield is 20% alone, so if all you do is you channel the ability Fleshcraft, you'll end up with 20% of your health pool as a shield, so 120% total. If you do end up channeling Fleshcraft near a pack of mobs that just recently died, or an elite or something like that, you can scale that up to 50% in terms of a shield. So you could be walking around with 150% in terms of, a buff to your health. That's ultimately what it feels like. The problem is you can only cast that once every 2 minutes, so it's not something that's on demand, but it's certainly something that helps for things like dungeon runs. The timing of Fleshcraft and when you'll be able to channel it to make the most of your shield, we're just not all too sure what that looks like. I have not been able to do extensive raid testing, but as of right now, I'm not even sure if what the viability is of channeling, getting 150% baseline health walking into a boss fight looks like. And ultimately, that shield is relatively weak because it is on a 2-minute cooldown and not something you're generally going to be casting in the heat of battle. So Flashcraft, great ability, makes a lot of sense to have from a tank perspective, but likely more of a utility shield and less of something that you're going to want to rely on from a tank perspective. So Flashcraft, while it's nice, is certainly not anything that's boosting the Necro Lords up in the rankings, which breaks my heart because I absolutely love the Necro Lords Covenant myself. I really like the thematic feel of Necro Lords, and I felt like Death Knight in general would just be a great thematic fit in Necro Lords. So it was a bit of a bummer to not have Necro Lords place a little bit higher up. Now, Abomination Limb, which is the ability granted to the class as a whole, has very, very, very little utility from a tank perspective outside of dungeons. And what I mean by that is Abomination Limb allows you to sprout an additional limb, and it's a 12-second extra limb that you have, and every second it deals damage based on a percentage of attack power. Currently it's at 22.5%. This goes out to as shadow damage, so this is a nice little boost to your overall DPS over the course of 12 seconds. However, the utility of this ability, especially from a tank perspective, is that it actually will start to pull targets that are further than 8 yards away from you into you. Now, a couple of reasons why this is very cool is that you can position yourself to interrupt spellcasters and trash packs, and make it so that you cast Abomination Limb, you run outside of the pack, and you pull them all into you, and that's essentially a free cast. However, this is on a 2-minute cooldown, and not having that readily available from pack to pack makes it a little less worthwhile. The other thing, and I kind of got to rag on it here for a second, is that as a tank, I wish it gave me a little bit more tankiness in some way, only because there's already legendaries that allow you to grip more. We already have the ability to cast Gorfine's Grasp and AoE grip. So the extra grip, while it's nice and it's very thematic and it's fun to push, quite frankly, it's a very fun ability. If I were ranking abilities in order of funness, I would put this one towards the top. It doesn't enable me to necessarily get the most out of a single target or a boss fight that I would like. It's more of a trash hero ability, and while that can be fun, it is certainly not something that is going to make me want to roll Necro Lords for my Blood Decay. At number 3 for Blood Decay, I have the Venthyr Covenant, and a couple of things that are worth talking about here. The first of which is Door of Shadows. Shout out to you. Anything that brings DK's extra mobility is a really, really good thing. Slowest class in the game. They absolutely need a little bit of help moving around in the field of battle, and so it was really nice to have Door of Shadows in my toolkit. Just being a relatively slow tank in general, it was something that felt really good overall. All that being said, I didn't find myself using Door of Shadows for anything other than, just getting around a dungeon, opening up on a trash pack. I wasn't necessarily, and I didn't feel the need to use it at all really during boss fights, with the exception of some where there's a little bit more running, but there's not too many that are like that in dungeons right now. However, the instance that you're looking at right now certainly has quite a bit of running, especially on the last boss. As far as the ability granted to the Death Knight class, Swarming Mist, there were some things that I really liked about it and some things that I did not like about Swarming Mist. So let me talk about first what I really, really, really liked about Swarming Mist. Firstly, it does a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage, and it does it really quickly. This is something that's up for 8 seconds, and every second it's dealing roughly 20% of your attack power as a dot to anything within 10 yards of you. So if you're pulling larger packs, you're doing a lot of damage to them very, very quickly, which is really nice. The other thing that I really liked about it is that it generates a ton of runic power anytime you have multiple enemies in front of you. So just to kind of give you an idea, for every enemy that it hits, you're generating 3 runic power per second. That, however, caps at 15 runic power per second. So at a max, over the course of Swarming Mist, you're really getting a total of 125 runic power over 8 seconds if you're hitting at least 5 targets for the duration of Swarming Mist. So it's going to fill up your runic power really fast. It's going to allow you to get some of those spenders out, and that's going to really kind of help your rotation and can really bail you out, especially if you need to get some death strikes in there in an oh shit moment, right? The things I don't like about it are really the single target elements of it. I like the fact that you get 10% dodge out of the ability because it's a nice passive extra cooldown you can use for a little bit more tankiness. But when you are only facing a single target, or if it's a boss fight, what you're looking at is only 24 runic power generated over those 8 seconds, and a dot that's, still strong, but again, a single target, it almost feels like it's a waste to cast it. So more often than not, I found myself, unless it was a boss fight, holding on to Swarming Mist until I was teeing off against another dungeon trash pack. So to just kind of pull up the overall grading scale again, when I look at number 3 and I ask myself what kind of content would I be able to do with Swarming Mist, I really kind of only felt like dungeons were going to be the main place that I'd be running Swarming Mist. I don't know how viable it's going to be in a raid setting, but against the single target, the only reason I'm casting it is for the dodge. I'm not really casting it for any other reason other than that. So it just becomes yet another cooldown, and you're not necessarily getting a whole lot out of 10% dodge, especially in a class that really relies on reactively healing themselves to full and making the healers look silly. So overall, Swarming Mist, while it is a strong and effective dot in terms of overall damage, it is not bringing everything I need in terms of my tank toolkit. It's stuff that I don't necessarily need. It's nice to have. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, so it's not that long. It's relatively quick, but I feel like if Blizzard tuned that down to maybe 30 seconds, now we're talking. Because then it becomes more of a rotational ability. It's not necessarily something that you think of in terms of needing it for mitigation purposes. You can be a little bit more liberal with it. It's only up for 8 seconds overall. So if Blizzard were going to do any tweaking to the ability, bringing that down to 45 seconds or 30 seconds would probably make it feel a heck of a lot better. At number 2, we have Kyrian. And the reason why Kyrian landed at number 2 for me is a couple of reasons. And I'm going to start first with the signature ability for the Covenant, Summon Steward. Summon Steward brings a little bit of utility in certain dungeons, but there's obviously each Covenant has a strength in 2 of the 8 dungeons as it stands today. What I really liked about Summon Steward as a DK, though, is that I was able to, on demand, cleanse myself of curse, disease, poison, bleed, something I normally can't do as a DK. So when I look at these abilities that were being granted, I ask myself, firstly, is this something that I could do already? Is it just adding to stuff I already have in my toolkit, or is it actually giving me something I didn't have before? And when you look at Decay, especially in Shadowlands, this is a class that is seeing a lot of group utility coming back. You're getting anti-magic zone for the group. You're getting your battle res. You're getting so many things. You're getting rune tap as baseline, right? So there are things that you're getting as a blood DK that you just didn't have before, and using Summon Steward and having 3 files of Serenity ready to go and being able to help out your healer in tough situations, that's going to probably help you push some higher keys. That's going to be a really nice thing to have in terms of raid utility. It's going to be something really nice when soloing in Torghast. So that's why I went ahead and I bumped Kyrian ahead of Venthyr, is really for that reason. That was the one extra thing that I felt like I got. Now, Venthyr gave me the extra mobility, so depends on what you're looking for. Again, that comes down to playstyle. Now, as far as the class ability, Shackle the Unworthy, I want to correct something that I had said specifically in my Kyrian video here. After doing more playing around with the ability. I had actually honestly thought that it was broken in beta. The way that I read the tooltip is that while Shackle the Unworthy is active, it reduces the cooldowns on your runes by 4 seconds, and that would just be flat out crazy, but it also would be kind of fun. As I did more testing and as I messed with it on the dummy, I realized, and there was a comment that, multiple comments that pointed this out to me, that it actually just reduces the cooldown of Shackle the Unworthy. Where this gets interesting is that while you are using your rune spenders, so that's your Marrow Rend, that's your Heart Strike. While you're using those and you've got Shackle the Unworthy up, so while you use it against that target, you're actually reducing the cooldown of Shackle the Unworthy for 4 seconds per each rune spender, which means that roughly 25% uptime moves much closer to 50 to 60% uptime because it's off of cooldown so frequently. This is something that overall you will have to make basic changes to your gameplay in terms of rotation so that when you cast Shackle the Unworthy, you're in a position where you can dump your Heart Strike, you can weave a couple of Death Strikes and dump some runic power as needed, but that you can use Heart Strike just because it costs 1 rune, and each time you use that, if you were to get 6 Heart Strikes off during a window where Shackle the Unworthy is up, you are actually reducing the cooldown of Shackle the Unworthy by 6 seconds. Now it's up for 14 seconds, so you're actually going to get a little bit more than that. So you're going to see anywhere between 24 to about 32, maybe a little bit more seconds off of the cooldown, which actually means that this moves to roughly a 50 to 60% uptime on your target. This is also going to just flat out give you that damage reduction by 5%. That's going to be something that is nice. It does not scale nearly as high as something like the Night Fae ability, where you will be stacking up to 8 stacks, but it's definitely worth calling out because Shackle the Unworthy now becomes a much more meaningful choice to make, especially when you pair that with the benefits that come with Summon Steward. So just to correct myself from the previous video, it does reduce the cooldown of Shackle the Unworthy every time you use a rune spending ability by 4 seconds, and that actually brings the uptime of Shackle the Unworthy up to about 50 to 60% on a single target. It would be great if they did something to make that hit all targets in the same way that Death's Due does, just to kind of equalize it a little bit. But I just wanted to call that out because this is still incredibly viable given the 5% damage reduction, and also the fact that you're going to have the uptime be so crazy darn high with Shackle the Unworthy. So overall, this is why I placed Kyrian as number 2 in this video. When you couple the fact that you've got that flat out 5% mitigation and it's got a 50 to 60% uptime on any given target, Summon Steward is actually much stronger as a DK because I do not have the ability to cleanse myself. I do not have the ability to remove poison or anything like that. So I suddenly have that in my toolkit where I didn't before. And when you think of all the other things that DKs have now as baseline, things like Rune Tap, things like Anti-Magic Zone, being able to battle res, that makes a DK just a crazy utility-based tank, especially when you factor in the grips and everything like that. So going with Kyrian is certainly a very strong option right now, and I've got it ranked number 2 overall. Now, last but not least, and no surprise obviously, the Night Fae Covenant comes in first for Blood Decay. Now, a number of things here, and I already mentioned it when we talked about Venthyr, but having extra mobility as a DK is really nice, and the fact that Soul Shape comes with not only just the extra mobility, but the ability to instantly teleport while you're in the Soul Shape form is really awesome. It's nice to be able to get around quickly as a Blood DK, not something that I'm used to having in my toolkit as a Blood DK, so having that and then just being able to pop out and jump in and do my Blood DK things after being whatever, a Vulpin whatever soul shape that we're going to be given down the road was a really nice thing. So kudos, because this feels really good, and I did not think it would. Death's Due, though, we have to talk about Death's Due. It's so good. As of right now, it is so good. The way that this thing works is that it replaces your Death and Decay, and as a Blood Decay, this is just something that you're rotationally casting pretty much on proc, or sometimes to open up to get initial aggro on a group of mobs or a raid boss. So to say that this feels awkward to cast would be a lie, because it's something that you're already doing anyway. So it replaces your Death and Decay, and now Death and Decay is Death's Due. This is a 1 rune cost, and it's on a 30-second cooldown, or of course you're going to get your procs, and you're going to be able to get some free casts of this thing up too. Now, enemies that stand within your Death's Due, they're going to get a stacking debuff, and ultimately you can scale that up to, in one cast of Death's Due, up to 11 stacks. Each stack represents 1% less damage that they're going to be able to do to you. So if you get 2 Death's Due out back to back, or whenever it comes out on the same target, you can stack that up to a maximum of 15%. So first of all, you get 15% damage reduction done to you. The second thing that it does is, as it debuffs your targets, it buffs you. So for however many debuff stacks of Death's Due that they have, once it gets up to 15, it's actually buffing the overall strength that you have by 15%. So you get a 15% boost to your strength. And then the last thing that it does, and yes, but wait, there's more. The last thing that it does is that while you're standing in Death and Decay, it allows your Heart Strike to hit 3 additional targets. So if you already are hitting 2 additional targets, you can hit 5 targets while standing within Death's Due, as long as they're in range. So this thing is the holy grail of aggro. It gives you that initial aggro up front. It reduces the damage incoming to you. It increases the damage that you're doing to your enemies. And again, that's not all. You're able to hit up to 5 enemies at any given time. So this thing is absolutely nuts right now. I don't see how Blizzard's going to tweak this thing at all. I think this is exactly the way it's going to be. The only thing they can do is really kind of reduce the overall buff and debuff. But again, I'm not sure how well that's going to scale with gear over time, so that's something that Blizzard certainly needs to keep an eye on. But Death's Due feels really great, and is easily the number 1 choice right now for rolling Blood Decay. Now, aesthetically, it makes absolutely no sense. Watching your Death and Decay go all blue and sparkly is a little weird at first, but then it turns from weird to super cool really quickly once you start to see all these things start to line up, and you start to see how good the ability is in just about every situation. So whether it's single target, whether it's multi-target, it really doesn't matter. Death's Due is super strong right now, and again, I don't know what changes we'll see to it, if any. I'm guessing it would be in the form of the buff and debuff and that correlation and that percentage. But other than that, even if it was a 10% buff and debuff, it would still be worth taking Night Fae just for the sake of getting Death's Due. And then to top it all off, you've got this soul shape that allows you to move crazy fast. It's an insta cast. It's not anything that you have to cast like you do Door of Shadows with Venthyr. So you're getting a couple of things that you don't have in your kit. You're getting outright mitigation for virtually no cost. I mean, 1 rune, not a big deal. You are getting extra mobility when you have essentially no mobility in your toolkit right now other than Death's Advance, and you're getting extra throughput through the 15% strength buff. So as long as you can get over the blue and sparkly, this is the place to park your Blood Decay. So anyway, this is going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts below. Tell me if I missed the mark. Tell me if you agree, disagree. Love to hear your feedback.